I have been with SoConnect for 2.5 years. Previous to that, I ran my own MSP, which was acquired by SoConnect, and I've now moved into a position of running the business. And we are a business, just for everybody's information, of about 38 staff, and we provide IT managed services, connectivity, and voice services to SMEs, primarily based in the UK, but with offices worldwide. I'll hand over to Euan.
Yeah, I'm Euan, CTO at SoConnect. Similar sort of background to Gordon. My main role at SoConnect these days is helping customers with their technology roadmap and putting together a cybersecurity posture for them.
Excellent, thank you, Euan. Okay, quick bit of housekeeping. Cameras and mics turned off. We will send recording to everybody that's in the meeting today, so you can go back to any points that were pertinent to you, they want to re-listen to. And if you've got any questions, if you wait to the end, that's probably the best way to do it, and post them into the chat. We'll answer them as best we can. Okay, so SoConnect have got very much a cloud-first approach to the IT solutions that we provide to our customers, with a focus on cybersecurity. This slide's really just indicating the spend that is estimated to grow over this coming year and years to come. Quite scary in terms of the numbers. 20.7% increase in this year, and that's against a backdrop of fairly tough economic conditions worldwide. What it's showing is the rapid adoption within all industries. We're focused in the SME sector, and the growing focus of and importance of cloud services within these industries. And certainly from our standpoint, we know that the amount of projects that we are running for our customers are almost exclusively cloud transformation projects of some kind or another, and that's either introducing new services in terms of cybersecurity for our customers, or migration projects where we're taking information that was on an on-premises server and moving that into the cloud. And that's backed up by the fact that we haven't sold a physical server to a customer for, I think, probably about 2.5 years, maybe even 3 years. And the only place that we can see where we would end up, or in a situation where we can see we'd end up selling a customer a server, would be when their connectivity is of such a low grade that having a full cloud service to run their business may be too much of a risk for them. So cloud services are growing, and they're going to continue to grow. And generally, they work well, they're secure, and they provide a huge amount of efficiency for the businesses that adopt them. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Euan.
Yeah, I mean, this report from Gartner, Gartner are pretty bang on with their annual reports, and they are for this one. And 20% in growth in any metric, is substantial. And the reason I think this is so high is just because there's a lot of lessons learned were COVID, with a lot of businesses running legacy on-prem solutions that when COVID hit, obviously were immediately redundant due to the type of working that was needed to go forward. And with hybrid working now, there's still a massive there, and it's almost a requirement now from employees to have hybrid working as part of their day-to-day jobs. So with that in mind, this is just underpinning what we're going to be talking about today a little bit. But I suppose it's just us now guiding everybody down this path that's inheriting this new technology roadmap, and making sure that the choices there match their business objectives for what they need.
Cool, thanks, Euan. So the shift towards the cloud, what are the benefits? So modern business landscapes, most organizations that we deal with, and we we're dealing generally with the SME and some MME sector organisations. They're all embracing the shift towards digitisation and moving either all or the large majority of their business services to cloud-based applications. And as I mentioned in the last slide, the adoption of new physical on-premises servers, we're seeing very, very little of that. Cost effectiveness, biggest thing that we can see and we're able to hopefully pass on to our customers in terms of realization is the need for substantial and repeated upfront costs on new servers, new infrastructure is reducing. Because there is generally a large migration cost for customers as they make that initial move to the cloud. After that, it's just ongoing subscription costs, which allow businesses to plan much more effectively for their IT needs over time. Scalability, it's one thing that's always talked about when people are discussing cloud services. Upscale or downscale your IT resources based on your requirements. For seasonal businesses, it's particularly relevant. Those businesses that are very busy during the summer and quieter during the winter, there can be huge costs and a lot that they can take advantage of with regard to that upsizing and downsizing of the IT resources that they are actually using. Flexibility. We all know that first few months of COVID, where everybody was working from home, was challenging for some businesses, significantly more challenging than others. You get massive flexibility with cloud computing. It removes the barriers of office working. There are challenges, of course, but I think 2 or 3 years into and after the COVID pandemic, and we're still settling into what the new normal looks like, but it almost, on every business, there's some degree of hybrid working. And the flexibility that offers businesses, as long as it's properly managed, is generally beneficial. Bring us neatly on to the increased productivity that you get from that if employees are given the right guidance and support in hybrid working. I believe it does increase productivity. I personally am a believer in having workers coming into the office, but by providing the flexibility of hybrid working, you're able to improve the work-life balance in a way that we probably wouldn't have even imagined 4 years ago prior to COVID. So it's an area that we as an IT company saw the benefit of straight away because we were fully cloud-based and have been able to promote that heavily ourselves in terms of our experience to customers when we've been having discussions about helping them consider their moves towards a fully cloud-based platform. Again, Euan, anything you want to add to that?
I'll just touch on the first 2 points. The cost effectiveness point, as it mentions there, it eliminates the need for the capital investment in IT infrastructure, and it's worth an exercise doing that when you're looking at potentially migrating to the clouds, is to do a like-for-like comparison if you are considering an on-premises solution. However, you need to take into account the future years of potential further migrations that you would save, 4 or 5, 6, 7 years, whatever the life cycle is of the equipment and the software that you need to run, and to take that into consideration. And for every exercise we've done this for, it's always cloud has always came up trumps on that one. And the scalability side, for SMEs, and particularly those that either want to grow at a certain rate or want to grow aggressively, adopting that cloud first approach is fantastic for that scalability, because then you can see your future IT budgets, because everything these days, as you probably know, is all per user these days, and everything is on a SaaS model, so it makes it very, very easy for you to predict your IT budgets.
Yeah, thank you, Euan. So cloud first versus traditional IT. A lot of this is fairly obvious, and we've touched upon it already. reduced hardware dependency. The future of the user devices that we're all using, I think that will change significantly over the next sort of five years or so. But that reduced and lack of requirement for on-premises physical servers, the highly flexible solutions and gives your organization a highly flexible approach to what they're doing. Restricted access into traditional IT and anywhere access in cloud first IT. But what that also allows us to do, because of the nature of cloud services and SaaS platforms, we can be very granular in access that users have. They can access any bit of software, any application from anywhere, but the job of the MSP like ourselves is to then make sure we understand the access requirements of an organization and then put the appropriate permission groups in place to make sure the access is only given to the parts of our platform that are absolutely required. And one of the things that I think the cloud first approach that we have as an MSP and the environment that many businesses are finding themselves in is because there's more of a focus on how people access data and the permissions that have got to be granted and controlled. I think we're probably in a much better place in terms of the control of data than we were previously on the on-premises solution, which I think is a really important point, and in terms of helping people understand all of the benefits of going to the cloud. It's not just the reduction in hardware dependency. It's not just the flexibility, but that control that you have is, I think, now greater than it was, but does require a relatively high degree of knowledge of the platforms and the capabilities of those platforms to make sure that only the right people have the right access. And we see in our industry and within the vendors we use, like Microsoft, we have seen changes to that even this year getting rolled out to reduce the once global admin permissions that used to be available on certain applications, to make it much more granular and therefore controlled. Maybe something that you can just add to as well, Euan.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Big thing for me there is that first one there, the reduced hardware dependency and cloud first. Thinking about SMEs, everybody now has probably got at least one personal device connected to some sort of corporate environment, i.e. their mobile phone. They may have a tablet, they may have something else potentially. It's very, very difficult to do that within a traditional IT environment. Sometimes it's not even possible. So devices are becoming more agnostic now in terms of the brand and the make and the model and the manufacturer. Like in days gone by, it was either had to be all iPhone or all Android or vice versa, all Dell, all HP. But really, with a cloud first strategy, it really actually doesn't really matter. The device eventually becomes agnostic at that point. There is obviously still need to have everything under controlled and managed, but there's less criteria to be considered when adopting a cloud first strategy. You can be much more flexible and access everything on the go wherever you are.
And just the last point there in our comparison is the high upfront costs for an ongoing cost for on-premises hardware. When you compare that to the pay-as-you-go that you get with cloud computing, in terms of planning and numbers what it's going to cost you, and that makes a big difference. So Euan, I'll let you lead on this one.
Sure. So cloud communication and collaboration. So 365 has obviously been around for a fair amount of time now, as you probably know, as have SharePoint and Exchange, long standing Microsoft products. Microsoft Teams came into the picture a few years ago. OneDrive came in just a little bit before that. So Microsoft have been developing their suite to provide the full productivity set that businesses need. And that's at any size, whether you're a single or two-man business, all the way up to kind of corporate enterprises in the thousands. But what really works well is the seamless connectivity and productivity between these solutions. As we are a Microsoft partner. We leverage these solutions for our customers, and we include them in their technology roadmaps to gain that productivity, to gain that flexibility for calls and instant messaging with their colleagues and sharing files, collaborating on files, and keeping control of their data when they're emailing it out to third parties. With having the right policies in place, none of the data really ever needs to leave your environment. You just allow access from it externally. So from a compliance point of view, it really checks all the boxes for them to really want to keep that under consideration.
Yeah, I've got nothing really to kind of follow up with there, other than just the collaboration, the way in which it frees up your business in terms of using the products available. And there are a huge number of Microsoft products. We don't even use all of them in the suite that can just change how you work.
The importance of cloud security. So there is you might want to say a yin and yang to this, with everything having on premise and then having it all in the cloud, and then therefore not publicly available, but the points of attack are publicly available, shall we say? So there is a risk to it, but the pros for all of this really do outweigh it, as long as you have a proper security approach to your cloud services. Even if it was doing the same for on-premise, you still have to have a good cybersecurity posture. So with everything being digitized and everything going online, like I mentioned in the last slide, whether it's your internal communications, your files, your email, all these things, they all still need to be protected by a robust security approach that really underpins everything you do on your technology roadmap. And the graph there for 90% of UK businesses says they've experienced a greater exposure of cyber risk. As a demonstration of that, and that's just a growing trend that we're seeing out there, because the vectors have shifted for bad actors, malicious people obviously want to gain a financial footing somewhere in businesses. It's a lot easier to attack and compromise SMEs than it is to attack a larger corporate enterprise that's got a much more mature setup. So it's really, really important for SMEs to make sure they've got something underpinning all of that.
Yeah, and for me, I think the trends within the cyber criminal space have moved with the adoption of cloud. I think that was going to happen anyway. One thing that, again, I think is beneficial of the focus of businesses and the move of businesses to cloud services is enhanced and increased that focus on security. There was potentially a bit of complacency with some organizations when they had everything within their own premises. They were very fully office based with their own network, and then we had a firewall in place, and that gave maybe a little bit of a false sense of security, because they were still vulnerable, very vulnerable to all sorts of attacks. By moving to the cloud and by the threats increasing anyway, it's also increased the awareness of security, which for me can only be a good thing. If companies are more aware of the risks that are out there, they're more likely to put something in place to mitigate those risks, and that's where we can come in with offering support to that.
So cloud assets at high risk, ransomware is the big one, and it's still a huge threat out there and still continuing to grow. The trends year on year have been the same since 2015, since it first started to surface, because it's getting easier and easier for bad actors and hackers and things like that to deploy this, through emails and through links. It's very, very easy for them to get it. So in the first graph there, 40% of IT professionals have reported an increase in ransomware attacks. That's kind of across various sectors and industries, not just the kind of the managed services space where we're in. We've seen that kind of across the world globally. So it is a rising threat, and it's something that does need to be mitigated. 51% of enterprises don't have a formal ransomware plan still at the moment. So ransomware been around as long as I mentioned. There really should be businesses have something in place to respond to this if it happens. The first, as soon as a ransomware incident happens, the first minutes and hour are absolutely crucial. Something like the Arnold Clark and Royal Mail incidents that happened end of last year, beginning of this year, are classic examples of that, of not being in the best position to respond to these incidents when they happen. So, I mean, that's just something we're trying to obviously coach our clients to get put in place for them. 55% of only those have recently suffered a cloud data breach. 55% identified as human error as the primary cause. And so the other part to this is to making sure that you're educating your staff, because we've found from all the data that we've looked at, having your staff properly trained and educated regularly and kept up to date with the latest threats is the biggest way to mitigate that number.
Thanks, Euan. Yeah, and user training, and we see so many of the incidents that we have dealt with within our business on behalf of our customers. It's almost always a human element that has been responsible for the last bit, and the attackers and the criminals out there know that. So, myths and facts about cloud security. The myth: the cloud is inherently insecure. As I've touched upon previously, well-managed cloud is even more secure than traditional IT systems. It's just understanding what the risks are and understanding what needs to be in place. And that's why almost on a monthly basis, we are talking to our customers about the security products that they have in place, the gaps that we see, and what we think is required to fill those gaps to mitigate the risk. We cannot remove the risk altogether. We never will be able to, but we can certainly reduce it. And by having everything in the cloud and managed properly, yes, we believe cloud is inherently more secure rather than less secure. Does an organization lose control of its data in the cloud? No, not at all. You retain full ownership and control. Rather than your data being on a server in your office, it's effectively on a server in a data center in another part of the country, another part of the world. And again, as long as you have the right controls in place, whether you're doing it internally or externally using an MSP like ourselves, you have control of that data. There are very, very few instances where you lose access because of some incident, some event. And certainly I would say there are probably fewer than if you were to lose access to your own server, if it gets some sort of malware attack or of some sort of major hardware failure. You're almost certainly at much higher risk of losing access to your data with a single server in your office than you are having it in a fully backed up and replicated data center. Security is the sole responsibility of the cloud provider. No, the cloud provider ensures security of the cloud. However, the customer is responsible for securing the data they put into the cloud. So that it almost, for me, that's a bit of a given. That's why we have GDPR. So you are responsible for the data that you have that is either owned by yourself or pertaining to customers, and you have to secure it. It's like if you had a car, you put a car into a garage. The garage's responsibility to make sure your car's locked up and can't get stolen. But anything that you have in the car is down to you. It's similar sort of analogies like that. I think I like to try and use to help people understand it. So yeah, responsibility of security is definitely for it's split. It's an even spread. And on-premise security is better than cloud security. Perfect response there. And the fact security is not about the location, it's about the strategies and the measures that are implemented. And again, with an office and a building where you've got your own firewall and server, and the firewall in particular has got great capabilities, it still needs to be managed by either an outside provider like ourselves or by internal IT. But with cloud services, you have security for each individual service. There are many ways that we can bring these together, like single sign-on, and there are applications that we can implement that will help protect users, like a software firewall, so a bit of software that sits on your machine that protects you whether you're in the office or in a coffee shop or a hotel or on holiday. So the security, again, I think is a lot of there's been a lot of movement and change in that, and it's had to get much better than it ever was. And I think for one, that any company that's fully adopted the cloud and all the security that goes with it is probably in a more secure place than they were when they had their servers on premises. I don't know if you want to just finish on that at all, because I know that's something you're particularly strong on, Euan.
Yeah, it is. Actually, the main thing I really wanted to highlight there was that third point. But the responsibility part for the cloud provider. This is very, very vague for a lot of solutions and services out there, and for businesses that are layman's and they don't know the IT speak and things like that. But as you mentioned, the keyword there was GDPR. Whoever owns the data has the liability to back it up, the responsibility. So I mean, that's something we have to touch on with customers and clients every now and then, just to make sure that's 100% clear.
Cool, thank you, Euan. So Cyber Essentials, I'm going to let you lead in this, Euan. You've been our Cyber Essentials advocate for all customers.
So where do you start with all of this when it comes to the security? Now, first of all, Cyber Essentials is not the finished article in terms of it's not the finishing point for your security journey. It's actually the place to start. So Cyber Essentials, brief background on it, is derived from ISO 27001 by the government. It's GCHQ. They came up with this several years ago for a place for small businesses to inherit the core, really important things from that governance that will protect their business and give them the best return for that compliance. And those are broken down into the 5 controls, which are the firewalls, user access controls, secure configuration, malware, and patch management. If you do those 5 things, and you're compliant with them throughout the period of your certification, which is annual, you have, I think it's above 99% resilience to all the cyber threats out there. So even if something does come into your environment in some way or another, if you are abiding by all 5 of those controls, it gives you the best position to be resilient, that stops the business from operating. And sometimes we've seen businesses go under subject to ransomware, for example. But if you have all these in place, your business is in a good position to then go on to further things as it matures, such as SOC 2 or ISO 27001 and some of the NIST frameworks as your business develops and grows.
So strategies for ensuring cloud security. Most of these, the terms here should be familiar to everyone. Data encryption is one of the first things. Even 5 years ago, getting data encrypted on a laptop was an additional task that had to be performed, and it provided a bit of an overhead in terms of the processing power. These days, it's something that we all take for granted, but it does protect unauthorized access, either for information that's on a machine that maybe gets stolen, but more primarily for data that is transported between 2 different endpoints. And WhatsApp's probably the most common application that people will have heard data encryption getting used, referenced to as a term, because its data is encrypted end to end. Nobody should be able to access that data as it's transferring from your device to the other user's devices. Access control, again, big thing, and I think something that there were massive gaps in access control prior to COVID and the adoption of cloud for a lot of users. So access control policies are just forcing organizations to think about who is accessing what applications and where, and how they can control that, and put as many applications under some sort of access control, and this is what multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, these are all ways of improving access control by reducing the amount of times you need to enter a username and password. And again, as everybody may have heard, in the not too distant future, passwords will be phased out. There'll be no need for them because there'll be other ways of confirming people's identity. Policy management, having policies in place across your organisation for how people access their devices, access information, how they share that information. Again, I think for the small business community, the adoption of cloud's been a great way of increasing the awareness of the requirement for policies, and had made it much easier to implement policies because you can get a lot of them off the shelf. You can buy them as part of the services that we provide. For example, our user training platform has a whole lot of policies that are kind of off the shelf that a company can then take and then amend slightly to suit their particular circumstances. But having policies in place at least gives your staff and your users a bit more of an understanding of what they can and cannot do, and makes them more accountable for how they do actually make use of the applications and the services. Security updates and patch management and backup and disaster recovery. I'm going to let you just talk about those two, Euan, because again, I know that's an area you've got a particular focus on with your role.
Yeah, so security updates, very, very important. To be Cyber Essentials certified for the compliance, for example, it's got to be delivered to the device within 14 days of release, which is actually not very long, but it's very, very important. A lot of the kind of the headliners that you've seen in the news over the last year or two have sometimes resulted in something called a zero-day vulnerability. So it's really, really important to have a solid a patch policy as part of your overall security strategy, and make sure everybody in the business understands it as well. It's very, very important. And I'm a big advocate for making sure that the policies that the staff can understand. It's not just kind of corporate lawyer talk, if you like. It's something that everybody can understand, that really know what the things you can do and the things you can't do and the reasons why. Because I think you get a lot better adoption from employees in their jobs. The last one, backup and disaster recovery. If you don't have that, then there's no point in implementing anything else. You're effectively ready to be compromised, and that really might have an operational impact on the business. I think the average time at the moment is something like 72 hours. If you can't recover, you've got a high likelihood that the business will go out of business. So having a simple backup and disaster recovery plan, and most importantly, testing it at least every 6 months, might be the thing that saves the day. And hopefully you never have to use it, but if it's there, you'll be glad it is. And
of course, a common misconception, I think, across it's maybe getting better now, but across a lot of industries, is that when we move to the cloud, we don't need to back everything up because it's automatically done. Incorrect. If there's the one big learning point everyone takes away from today, Microsoft 365, Microsoft don't provide a backup as standard. They'll keep information for 30 days, and then it's gone. And even before that 30 days, users can get rid of information. So you need a backup in place to protect your data for any platform that you're using. So cloud security best practices, we've mentioned it a couple of times already. Educate your staff. The unfortunate breaches that we have got awareness of amongst not just our customers but others in the industry as well. Almost always it's down to employees being distracted or led astray by communications coming in that cause them to click on links that take them to fraudulent sites where their log information is stolen. So we must train our employees, and that's a responsibility that sits firmly with the employers. So any business owners here, it is your responsibility to educate your employees about cloud security. And given that I think it's accepted that us humans are the weak line in the defence by making sure that they have some form of training and a better awareness of the risks that are out there. You massively reduce the risk to your business and the loss of data or any sort of financial compromise. Collaborate with trusted providers. So we talk to our customers a lot about cloud security. I think there's sometimes a bit of a suspicion from some of our customers that we're just trying to sell another service for the sake of it. It's absolutely not the case. MSPs are all too aware of the threats that are out there. Any IT service provider will generally have seen some sort of a customer being compromised because of not having the right security in place. All we're trying to do is plug all the gaps that we can and, as I say, reduce risk as much as possible. And there's a huge amount to be learned without having to spend a huge amount of money, to be honest. The employee education part is one of the lowest cost ways of massively reducing risk. But there's also all the other services that can be put in place to just plug little gaps across your IT estate and improve that overall security. And then the cybersecurity policy. If you sign up to our cybersecurity standard pack, for example, that includes user security training. And as part of that, we can provide you with a cybersecurity policy, which you can then use as a template to build around the application services you have in place in your business, so that the management of the business are more aware of what the policies are. And then you can share that with your employees, and that should also help identify gaps where you can come back to the user education part. I'll just go onto the next slide. Euan, this is definitely one for you.
Yeah, so everybody's obviously heard of antivirus. It's been around for 30 odd years now, I think it is. So a long time. However, things in this space have been changing over the last couple of years, and now things are really starting to speed up. So the shift is now underway from traditional endpoint antivirus through to endpoint detection and response. And like I mentioned earlier, the first minutes, when an incident is underway, are the most crucial part of that process in responding to that incident. And this is where EDR, endpoint detection and response, comes in. It actually acts on behalf of a trained cybersecurity team to deal and mitigate detected threats in environments, or even suspicious threats. So, which is where antivirus really falls down, and that's why there's the shift from antivirus across to EDR. So traditional antivirus was very good at responding to signatures that were updated very infrequently, right? So your antivirus historically might have updated just once a day. There might have been a virus every couple of months, something like that. Very good at that. Things have evolved since then. Now, with various EDR solutions, all the EDR solutions out there, they update, I think it's once every 10 minutes. So, and that's updating it with the latest threats that are out there. That's how frequently threats are getting onto global networks and potentially becoming a risk to businesses. And so EDR steps in at the first line, stops and responds to these threats and mitigates it either by quarantining something on the machine, whether it's came in an email or it's came in through a link, or if it's not been able to do that, it will actually isolate the machine entirely if it's sitting on a corporate network, for example. So it'll switch off all its connectivity, all its network with everything else in the environment, and allow a trained professional, security professional, to deal with it and verify whether it's a false positive or a true positive, and remediate that issue before it potentially spreads across the network through a sophisticated threat. So yeah, the landscape is definitely changing there a lot. We're looking at potentially rolling everything out ourselves across the board, hopefully in the next couple of months. SentinelOne has been part of our standard security offer now all of this year, but we're really trying to encourage all of our customers to adopt this new approach going forward and recognise that antivirus is not a suitable solution for their defences going forward.
Well, thank you, Euan. And yeah, it's just as the threat landscape has changed over the last couple of years, and in particular this year, the endpoint detection response, the EDR solution, is becoming more and more of just a prerequisite. You actually to have it rather than a nice to have. So a cloud first approach, your path to moving towards this cloud first strategy. Assess your current infrastructure. Again, we've been talking to all of our customer base over the last 12 months or so, or last couple of years, but in particular last 12 months, about looking at how they move from their current on-premises infrastructure, if they have it, to a more cloud-based infrastructure. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all, but there's certainly an opportunity to help companies become more flexible and more prepared for what the future brings by moving as much as possible to the cloud now. And any applications that they just cannot, for various different reasons, that are maybe a third-party applications that require an on-premises solution, there are ways to fix that. Define your business objectives. Clearly outline what you want to achieve through the transition to a cloud-first approach. As I say, there's not a one-size-fits-all, and there may be some organizations that feel that they don't want to go fully to the cloud just now. But that's, have the discussion with your IT provider or IT specialists. Go out to consultancy firms, ask them to have a look, and make sure that what you're doing is right. But you need to look ahead. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you think you're going to be in 5 years? And what is the IT landscape going to look like over that period? Because that may help just push you down the cloud route maybe quicker than you expected. Choose a provider that aligns with the business needs and can provide you the right services and support. There are lots of IT companies out there, and there are lots of IT companies that do the job really well. Some are quicker to adopt cloud than others. Make sure you've got the right right advice and the right solutions in place. Planning your migration, if that's what you do. And as I said, phased migration. So it may be that you move a certain amount of your data into SharePoint, for example, but you can't move all of it into SharePoint because there's a certain amount of the information within your business that is reliant on a third-party application that needs to be on premises. So there's a lot of planning to be done, but you do need to do the planning, including testing and validation, to make sure that what you're doing is understood within the business, because the last thing you want to do is impact business performance as you're going through any sort of change. And then, of course, implementation and monitoring, making sure that after you've implemented, that you're monitoring and managing the changes have been made. Be prepared to make some tweaks to how you've done things, or to improve and continue your user training. We provide training as part of our the initial migration work we do for customers, but you can always have additional training, plan it in for 3 months down the line and 6 months down the line to make sure that staff are keeping up to date with the changes. Because moving to the cloud and the change in how people have been working for, in some circumstances, 10, 15, 20 years, don't underestimate the impact that has. So a lot of this is all about assessing, planning, and training to make sure that everybody manages to keep up. And I think I'll just move on straight on to the next slide, Euan, as we're moving on. Cyber risk assessment. I'll pass that on to you, Euan, just to talk about.
Yeah. So what is a cyber risk assessment? A risk assessment is a systematic process that identifies, analyzes, and evaluates the potential risk that could compromise your organization's information security. So understanding your assets, understanding exactly what you have, understanding the threats to those, any vulnerabilities, and performing a very simple, non-invasive assessment on your entire IT environment will give business owners a fantastic landscape view of what they need to prioritize in order to start mitigating those risks. So I'll give you a full understanding of what the next steps are you need to take. Then you can make informed decisions on those, and again, take into account budgets and cost of change, things like that. Again, year on year, potentially into your budgets, and making sure that anything you have in place to mitigate risk is then properly managed and is managed proactively. So that's not like what things used to be in the good old days, where you set up antivirus and you leave it to respond on its own. Unfortunately, you can't do that now with modern security solutions. You have to be very, very proactive to make sure that the safeguards are in place and keeping everything nice and robust.
Yeah, and the cyber risk assessment is something that we can provide free of charge to customers and to non-customers as a way of just helping identify and learn what risks potentially are in place and suggest potential routes you could go down to mitigate those risks. And that was the last slide. I hope it's been useful for everyone. I see there's one question which is relatively technical, which I'm gonna let Euan come back on. If there are any other questions just now, we can certainly pick those up, or if anyone has anything they'd like to follow up more directly, please send an email into Claire or myself or Euan afterwards, and we'd be more than happy to follow up directly with emails. But in the short term, let's just pick up a couple of these questions as they're coming through. Euan, do you want to pick up that first one?
Yeah, I'm just having a read it now. Give me just a second. Yeah, most of these are now, so yes, evolving landscape of antivirus software and its ability to combat phallus and malware attacks. Yeah, so this is where EDR really comes in. So EDR doesn't just respond to file threats, also responds to signature-based threats. So it responds to hashes. It responds to anything that has malicious code in it. I mean, it can be something sitting in memory. It doesn't just look at the files that would traditionally come in for like an attachment in an email and things like that. It won't prevent any API protection, obviously, because that's obviously on the cloud infrastructure side of things. But it does prevent code execution, like I said, on various different signature vectors. So it protects everything that is that would go on the surface of an endpoint. So obviously a laptop or a desktop or something like that. Anything that's capable of running on that, whether it's through code, hashes, files, etc., it will completely cover all that.
And Jamie, you've got quite a technical network connectivity question there. It's not something I think we're going to pick up here. That's something we could certainly have a discussion with you offline, because it's probably beyond most of what most of the people in the webinar are probably not just interested in, but it goes quite technical. And maybe Euan will give you a quick input to that. On the question from Mary, so data backups and disaster recovery, there are a number of different solutions out there. If we look specifically at Microsoft services, for example, we use Acronis as one of our backup providers, and they will back up all Microsoft 365 mailboxes, all SharePoint data and Microsoft Teams data, and they'll do that every night. All the data will get backed up, which we can then restore either individual emails or full mailboxes to customers as they need it. So yeah, there are definitely solutions that are in place, and we do test them with customers as well. Retention policies, frequency, yeah, that again, there are a lot of these policies that are out the box the same, but they can be then manipulated and changed to suit the customer's requirements. I hope that answered that particular question. And for on-premises backup policies, yeah, we have an in the cloud disaster recovery option for customers. It's a bit more expensive, but if you have an on-premises server that fails or is encrypted, within 30 minutes we can switch you to an instance of that server running in the cloud, so that the business downtime is absolute minimum. But the more complex the solution, the higher the cost to have that in place. But we do have that kind of solution in place for a number of customers. any other questions? And thank you very much for the questions that were posed. That's very much appreciated. So, final slide for those that are still here. Claim your free cybersecurity audit. So any business with over 20 employees, we will offer a free cybersecurity audit where we'll run a series of tests using different tools to have a look at, and a lot of these are question-based tests that need to go to a person or organization that will hopefully allow you to identify gaps in your current security, or if nothing else, let you see where your business is actually scoring quite well. So listen, thank you to everybody for listening to Euan and myself for the last 50 minutes or so. We hope you found it interesting and useful. If you have any follow-up questions, Claire, our head of marketing, has just posted our email address, hello@soconnect.co.uk, or reach out to Euan and I on LinkedIn, and we're more than happy to have any follow-up questions or conversations with anyone. And for those customers of SoConnect that have been part of this, hope you enjoyed the last 50 minutes. And again, if you get any questions you'd like to follow up with, then please do get in touch. And at that, with no more questions in the chat, I'll thank you everybody very much, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.